Eating disorder affects 3 in 4 American women between the age of 25 to 45. So, how are you doing? Are you gonna say fine? Because that's what Lisa used to say. Lisa Liberman-Wang had an eating disorder whenever she was younger. And every time they would ask her, hey, how are you doing? She would say, I'm fine. But in reality, deep down, she was stuffing her feelings with food. She was a compulsive overeater and she would purge all the time. So in reality, she wasn't fine, but she would respond, like, I am fine. So through the process of recovering, through the process of healing, in her story, she says that she goes from fine to fab, which that's the name of her book, Fine to Fab. I'm going to give you homework as for you to figure out what fine stands for. I will tell you that fab stands for fabulous, for awesome, and for beautiful. So she went from being fine to being fabulous, awesome, and beautiful. And she described to us that whenever she was younger, she felt alone, she felt unloved, she was depressed, she felt lost, she felt angry and sad, and she felt like she wasn't good enough. I mean, she was a perfect student, as in she looked for perfection. She was an overachiever, so she had great grades. She graduated from college with, outstanding grades. She found a beautiful job. She was an overachiever. She was like making a good living because when she was younger, her parents told her that she had to be an independent woman so that she didn't have to depend on a man. So what she thought is like, okay, I have to earn enough money to take care of myself. So she was a very successful woman from the way you would look at her, from the way that if you would analyze her achievements, you would say, oh, wow, she's amazing. She's beautiful. And she's also an overachiever. She's done so much. But in reality, deep down, she shares with us that that wasn't the case. She didn't feel fulfilled. She was, she felt alone. She went through depression. And somehow, when she was younger, she figured out that by being sick, that meant being loved. That meant, people caring for her. So she would eat and eat and eat, and then she would binge and purge, and then she would make herself sick. So she would go to the ER. She shares with us that she went to the ER 5 times. And it wasn't pleasant, but deep down in her psychology, she thought that was the only way that she could be loved and she could feel that people would care for her. So making an emphasis on that, sometimes our internal representation of our events and life play a huge role on our future behavior. The way we represent our events, the way the meaning that we give to our events, plays a huge role on how worthy we are, on how loved we feel, on how important we feel. Because, like in her example, her internal representation, it was that she wasn't good enough, because based on her childhood, she shares with us that she grew up in a dysfunctional home where her life wasn't all perfect. She was responsible for cooking. She was responsible for the house. She shares that whenever things broke, like the dishwasher, the vacuum cleaner, it's like, oh, Lisa broke it. So she felt guilty and responsible. So growing up, her internal representation of the events that happened in her life, they stacked up, that she never felt loved. She never felt truly that she was enough. She never felt that she was beautiful. She developed this disorder, of finding her feelings in food and causing a health problem, a health issue that almost killed her. I mean, she shares with us that she lost like 30 pounds in 5 days or something like that. Whereas like from the ER, they sent her to the psychiatric institution, because they were afraid that she was threatening her life. So here she ends up with a lot of mental medication, to balance her out, and she was still not feeling any better. So you have to read her book. You have to read her book so you can understand how sometimes we bring our past into like now. And it hurt us because we have not let go, because we have not understood, the reality of that event. She thought her dad was like too hard on her because he never told her that she was a princess. He never told her that she was beautiful. She never made her feel like she was a little girl. It was the opposite. He was very rough on her. She had, like very strong nicknames for a girl. So she had trauma. She had trauma because the way her mind, her psychology interpreted how her mom, how her dad would interact, how they would talk to her. It wasn't the way that she expected. Her model of the world was different growing up. We all expect the perfect family, right? Because we watch TV and we see how other people interact. So we tend to believe that that's what we want. We want the perfect family. And whenever we don't get it, we think that we're not good enough. We think that we're broken. We think that it's on us. So in her case, she developed a disorder, an eating disorder that threatened her life. And through the experience, she shares with us how she overcame, how she was aware of it, and she said, okay, that is enough. I have to do something about it. And she shares 7 steps of how to go from fine to fab, which it is. I'm gonna ask you to look for the acronyms of that fine to fab, which is fabulous, awesome, and beautiful. So her first step is acknowledge the fear and doubts. We all have fears, we all have doubts, because we are not perfect, and we all have the fear of not being good enough. We all have the fear of not doing it very well sometimes, any task that you're responsible of and you're hesitant because you've never done it before or you haven't done it enough times. So fear steps over, and then doubt, like, are you going to be able to do it? Are you going to be able to perform at a high standards? So we all have fears and doubts. So if we can learn to acknowledge what triggers our fear, what triggers our doubts. So that's her first step. Her second step is taking inventory of life lessons and beliefs. Sometimes we're carrying, that past. Something happened to us in the past. Like in her case, she was sexually abused 2 times. So she had, trauma that she needed to deal with, that she needed to believe that it wasn't her fault. She needed to believe that she was loved, that she was enough, that the circumstances didn't mean that she wasn't enough, but somehow she was trapped in the past. Not, several traumas from her childhood and her teenager time. So sometimes we bring traumas from the past that we're in our adulthood and we haven't been able to overcome our traumas. So let's begin to work on those to free ourselves. So step number 3, or secret number 3, is breaking through toxic emotions and meanings. Sometimes we have the toxic emotions in our head. They're the negative thoughts that create our emotions. So what are those toxic emotions that are bothering you? Number 4 is like breaking through trance. Take action. Like begin to break those triggers, or heal those triggers in a way that they're not longer negative, but they're positive. make you realize what you learn, how strong you are because of it. Number 5, it says uncovering unconscious patterns of behavior. We have to go back to that trauma and see what caused that trigger and how we're behaving now because of it. Is it serving us or is it not serving us? Step number 6, it says stop waiting for perfection. Perfection, it is a very low standard for us to behave. We always have the anxiety and the stress because we think we're not being good enough, because it's not perfect, because life will always bring us surprises, right? So perfection is not achievable because you always be miserable if you're searching for that perfection. Step number 7, she says making peace, practicing gratitude and celebrating. If you know Lisa, every time at the end of her call, she's always, okay, let's celebrate. She's always wanting us to celebrate life, celebrate your wins, celebrate, that you're here today. I totally advise you to read the book, to learn more about her story, so that we can understand some of our traumas that we have in the past and we have not been able to overcome. We have not been able to heal from it. So maybe her story will help you see how she went from just being fine to being fab, which it is fabulous, awesome, and beautiful. If you like this video, if you like the information, please click the button below and like or subscribe and tell me what you thought about it. Tell me if there is a book out there that you want me to read. Maybe I've been meaning to read it as well, but I just haven't had the time because there are so many books that are on my list already that maybe the one that you need to hear from is the same one that it's on my list, but I just haven't been challenged enough to read it yet. Blessings to you all, and I hope you take care.